Now to Canada, where the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has announced a significant boost to defence spending. The budget for defence research will rise by 85% over the next 10 years to reduce Ottawa's reliance on US arms sales. Mr Carney said Canada can no longer sustain its dependence on its southern neighbour.
Canada's armed forces testing to see if the country is ready for a very cold war, as the nation prepares to boost its investments in military and security infrastructure. The Army is conducting drills in Canada's far north in order to improve its ability to act in the Arctic.
The conditions are really challenging, but I think we're coming up here and learning what we need to do better for next time, and I think we're really meeting the moment.
Canada's first ever defence industrial strategy is set to scale up Canadian firms and create secure jobs in the military sector. The announcements made by the Prime Minister Carney means the country will reach NATO's 2% military spending target 5 years earlier than promised.
This strategy is about protecting Canada's sovereignty in its fullest sense. In other words, our ability to act independently in that more dangerous and divided world. And to be clear, this strategic autonomy doesn't mean isolation.
Relations between Ottawa and Washington have been strained since Donald Trump came to office last year, when the U.S. president launched a trade war with its northern neighbor. Canada hopes its plans to transform its defense industry will also boost the country's economic growth within a decade.
We're going to speak to Gaia Rivard-Pichet, who's an executive director of the Conference of Defence Associations Institute. That's one of Canada's leading defence and security think tanks. Welcome to DW. Can we start with your reaction to the announcement by the Canadian government of this massive increase in investment in homegrown defence industries?
Well, it's an announcement that was very well received here in Canada. It had been long awaited. The new strategy, the defense industrial strategy, was first supposed to be announced this fall, following the announcement this summer by the Carney government that we would reinvest in defense to meet the 2% and then a 3.5% of GDP with defense investment. But really, the strategy that's been announced earlier this week is about making sure that Canadian businesses can really benefit of those investments, and making sure that while we make sure that the Canadian Armed Forces can maintain a technological and operational advantage on our adversaries, those investments will also contribute to economic growth, creating jobs, and just benefit all Canadians.
Here's the thing, though. These sort of major announcements are all very well. Billions of Canadian dollars going into Canadian companies. Great. But how do you assess the likelihood that this announced increase in investment will be sustained and not watered down by future governments? Because we're talking about a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but as we know, the threat environment has changed quite a lot. I think Europe and Germany are seeing it first and foremost, but in Canada, we're feeling it as well. Canada has benefited from the peace dividend following the end of the Second World War, but we're now in a very different environment. I think in Canada, what really led to our realization that the world had changed was first the full invasion of Ukraine by Russia, but then the comments by the Trump administration in the United States about Canada that could potentially become the 51st state of the United States.
Can I just interrupt you there? Because what you've laid out there are lots of rational reasons why Canada should approach this. But what we know is that government doesn't always appear to work rationally. So the Carney government in this moment says, let's throw all this money at Canadian industry. If Russia doesn't do anything stupid to Europe or to Canada in the next year or so, then future Canadian governments may look at this announcement and say, well, actually, we need the money for welfare, we need the money for the health service, so let's just water it down. How do we guard against that, and how do you assess the likelihood of that happening?
Well, when it comes to Canada, it's the first time in her history that economic security and national defense are so closely aligned. And that has led a lot of Canadians to realize the environment in which we are. And this is why I think the strategy is clever about about bringing together not only the element of making sure we're able to defend ourselves, addressing core vulnerabilities that Canada has in terms of national defense, but then making sure that those investments will have clear benefits for Canadians through job creation. We're in a difficult position now with the tariffs, and we are for every dollar invested in military equipment, 75 cents are going to the United States. If we diversify, if we reinvest at home, this is a way that we could actually generate growth in an economy that is so closely linked to the United States at the moment.
And given the proximity of the massive US arms industry, does Canada actually have much of a defence industry at the moment?
We do have a defense industry. However, I think it can grow bigger, and the strategy is really giving us the mean to do so. It's proposing a framework that is proposing 3 different approaches. The first one being building sovereign capability, what we actually need to defend Canada, then partnering with the United States, but also other nations, partner nations like European countries and NATO members, as well as some of our partners in the Indo-Pacific to acquire certain capabilities. And then in the case of very advanced capabilities, we would be looking at buying them from partners and like-minded nations like the United States.
Thank you for talking us through that. Gaia Rivard-Pichet from the Conference of Defence Associations Institute.
My pleasure.